What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content that I'm uploading onto my channel, then feel free to subscribe, and you can also offer suggestions on topics and characters and storylines and whatnot that we can have discussions on later on in this channel. So, it's always been my opinion that when another YouTube channel or YouTube channels helps you to create something that you wouldn't normally be able to do on your own, that some measure of reciprocation is owed, that it's incumbent on, me in this instance, to give recognition to those YouTube channels. It'd really be a dick move to kind of leave them hanging. So, you guys should go check out a couple of Star Wars related YouTube channels. The first one is Star Wars Explained, and the second one is Star Wars HQ. Star Wars HQ especially helped me with this, even though they didn't know it, but I was looking up information about Darth Maul, more specifically how it was that Darth Maul survived his supposed death on Naboo and what it is that happened to him afterwards, because I knew he appeared in the Star Wars Clone Wars TV show, but the question was, how do we get from point A to point B? That's what I was looking for, and there didn't seem to be any information on it. But then I was going through a video by Star Wars HQ, and he had run over it. So we're going to talk about this. Now, I would imagine a video that's Star Wars related would bring people into my channel who wouldn't normally watch my videos. They'd have no interest in the Incredible Hulk or Thor or something like that, or DC Comics related, but they do want to know about Star Wars. And so because of that, because every video is somebody's first video, for those of you guys who are familiar with Star Wars, bear with me for a second. So in the realm of where things stand right now, when it comes to Star Wars going into the release of Rogue One, we have what's called Legends and we have what's called canon. We're not going to go too deep into this because I've got videos on this stuff, but canon is just another word for official. That's really all it means. So when somebody says that's Star Wars canon, it means that's part of the officially recognized Star Wars content. Legends is the unofficial Star Wars stuff. And so what this means is before Disney bought Lucasfilm, you had 30 years worth of Star Wars expanded universe stuff. For example, after Empire Strikes Back in the expanded universe, you had the introduction of a race called the Yuuzhan Vong, which had come into conflict with the new Galactic Republic, and it led to the death of Chewbacca, among other things. I believe that Luke Skywalker fell to the dark side, I think. I'm not going to swear to that, but I do believe he ran into the spirit of Exar Kun, who was a Sith Lord that originally created the double-bladed lightsaber. There were a lot of these things that went into expanding the mythos. The problem was when Disney bought Lucasfilm, they basically wiped the slate clean. They said the only things that matter right now are the movies, the Clone Wars TV show, the Star Wars Rebels TV show, and whatever it is that we happen to release in comics or whatever it is that we sanction. And so unless if it says Legends on the front of it, it means that's not official stuff. That's really the only way to differentiate between what's official and what's not official. Of course, you have the Star Wars Wikipedia, which will tell you everything you need to know on what's official and not official. But with regards to Darth Maul, the question of how it was he survived his trip on Naboo is actually answered in a comic book graphic novel called Sith Hunters. Now, this is only given to us in a few pages, and the reason why is because this was part of a 12-issue graphic novel run, I think, that was based or tied into the Star Wars Clone Wars TV show. And so what this did is it basically filled in the holes that were sort of left vacant by some of the episodes that we got. So when Darth Maul first appeared in the Star Wars Clone Wars after his supposed death at the end of the Phantom Menace, all they really said was, well, he used the dark side of the Force to bring himself back. And that was it. We didn't know anything else. We had no clue how it was that he came back. We don't know what steps that he took. All we knew is that he just used the dark side of the Force. What this tells us is that after he was cut in half by Obi-Wan Kenobi, his desire for vengeance and his vendetta against Obi-Wan was so extreme that he literally used the Force to preserve his physical body. Like he fed on rage. Is literally just anger and rage are what kept him there. Now, it wasn't just the Force, it was also a matter of circumstance. So this begs the question, did Darth Maul use the Force in order to engineer these circumstances for survival? But when he had fallen down into what was believed to be the planet's core, this led to him falling down this reactor shaft. It led to him eventually falling into some kind of a tube where he was mixed with chemicals, so on and so forth, but they allowed him to survive. It effectively preserved his body, after which he stowed away on a vessel and then effectively went into hiding. And so what this did is this wrapped back around to his introduction into the Clone Wars TV show. Now, again, this is really all we get when it comes to how it was that he survived. There's not much else that's offered here, and in fact, it doesn't really need to be. I mean, the survival of Darth Maul is cool, but it's really more the character of Darth Maul that people like so much as how he survived. It's a fun aside. It's a fun thing like, hey, that's cool to know. But then the other thing is, well, what happened after? Like, I mean, if he's back, then what happened? Well, this was originally supposed to be answered in the Clone Wars TV show. The problem was it was canceled before they could actually answer that question. And so what we got was a 4-part miniseries called The Son of Dathomir. And The Son of Dathomir basically follows up to Darth Maul. The kicker to this is that it still leaves things open-ended. Now, it's not really a bad thing because it leaves the door open later on, but this is one of those circumstances where I say that while Marvel is the official publisher of Star Wars related comic books, it doesn't mean that Disney can't sanction things. And so what they did is they went to Dark Horse Comics, which were the ones previously publishing Star Wars related comics before Disney bought it and handed the title over to Marvel, and they grabbed the Son of Dathomir and said, this is now official content. This is stuff that's actually in the Star Wars universe. So what this does is this actually ties into the existing series, or I guess it ties into episode 2 with regards to the Clone Wars, and it's actually going on around the same time as that. Now, at the end of Darth Maul's appearance in the Clone Wars TV show, what this did is it picked up with that and said that he had been taken prisoner by Darth Sidious. Now, something that I'd like you to notice over the course of this video are the differences between Darth Maul and Darth Sidious. Darth Maul is very capable in terms of how he's depicted here. He's not just some guy with lightsabers that just goes through and just crushes things. He's not just some Sith marauder that has prodigious lightsaber skill. Instead, he's pretty capable in terms of his military strategy, but he's nothing like Darth Sidious. And the reason why I say that is because, again, according to the official Star Wars stuff, Darth Sidious plays a long game. Now, if you were to go by legends, by the unofficial expanded universe, which is no longer relevant, Darth Sidious was actually, you know, like he was a guy that was just jumping bodies. That's really all he was doing, was just jumping from one host body to the next for God only knows how long. I don't remember how long he was doing that, but that's how he kept himself alive. With regards to the official Star Wars stuff, he was planning decades ahead of time. I mean, he was like, I'm not gonna take over the galaxy overnight. This is gonna be something that's gonna happen decades. It's gonna take a long time, but he was willing to play the long game, and because of that, he ultimately came out on top. But it also shows us that somebody like Darth Maul could come very close to throwing a wrench in the works and ultimately bringing down everything that Darth Sidious had worked for, or at least coming close to that. Now, again, we also get a little bit of touch on this, but the bigger picture here is they're actually going for a woman named Mother Talzin. Now, with Darth Maul being held prisoner by Darth Sidious, what happens is that in the midst of all this, he's basically freed by Mandalorians. Now, these are not just any Mandalorians. These aren't just, you know, regular guys. They're actually led by a man named Commander Saxon, and they were actually part of a group called the Shadow Collective, I think it was. But with regards to these particular Mandalorians, they identify themselves as Black Sun. Now, to sidetrack here for a second, historically speaking, and this is actually something that was carried over from the expanded universe when it came to the Mandalorians, they were somewhat like the Spartans of the Star Wars universe, in the sense that they were literally just bred for war. I mean, they were just created for the purpose of fighting wars, and their society had existed in that fashion for years and years and years and years and years. The problem with this was that the new empress, or the new ruling queen, had effectively taken on a more peaceful and a more pacifist nature, and because of that, some of the Mandalorians looked at her role and said she's not a true Mandalorian ruler, and they effectively broke off, calling themselves a Black Sun. Now, when Darth Maul had discovered, I guess when he had returned, or I guess, you know, when he had survived and more or less reconstituted himself, he had allied himself with these Mandalorians, and so they more or less became insurgents. The difference is that instead of trying to bring down the Mandalorian Empire and stopping there, instead, the idea of Darth Maul was to start with this Black Sun Mandalorian group, and then look to the entire galaxy as a whole and literally take over everything. And so what this does is sort of bring them all back together again, and it shows us that Darth Maul does have allies, that he's not working alone. Now, something else really cool here is also his conversation with Count Dooku. And this is big because Darth Maul and Count Dooku had never met up until this point. This is the first time they encounter one another, and in fact, Darth Maul even goes on to say that, you know, I've heard about you, a Jedi who fell to the dark side, who betrayed the Jedi Order. I expected more. Now, we know with Count Dooku that looks aren't everything, appearances aren't everything. He's still a very capable Sith, but the fact remains that in the eyes of Darth Maul, Count Dooku's not on his level. You know, whether it's lightsaber skill, whether it's command of the Force, whether it's just overall experience, that he does not view Count Dooku as being, you know, on his same level. Now, this is somewhat proven true in the fact that these Mandalorian guys are able to break Darth Maul out, but we also have to consider that these are elite Mandalorians. These are not just your average soldiers. These guys are the tippy top, some of the absolute best when it comes to fighting using guerrilla warfare tactics and conventional warfare in virtually any situation. And so once he's basically broken free, the question that's asked by these, you know, battle droids is, should we go after him? Now, the reason why this is important is because this is part of Darth Sidious' larger plan. Darth Sidious could go after Darth Maul and he could capture him pretty easily, and that would pretty much be it. That would be the end of Darth Maul. But this is a perfect example of them basically, you know, letting the smaller fish go free for the purpose of catching bigger fish. Because remember, Darth Sidious wants to take out Mother Talzin. Now, we'll find out why here in a little while, but we also have General Grievous. Now, this is one of those circumstances where it's everybody is searching for Darth Maul, but everybody's also hands off. They really want to be more aware of where he is as opposed to engaging him directly. Now, this does end up happening by General Grievous. General Grievous does end up going after him, but the goal goal is not to kill him. The goal is to injure him. And the reason why is, once they go through their battle, once they go through their fight, once Darth Maul seems to be able to get the decisive victory and effectively run General Grievous and his forces out of there, he has a conversation with Count Dooku, and he says, now what was the point of all this? What was the point of fighting Darth Maul, not killing him, and then essentially allowing him to escape? And Count Dooku says, because he's going to do what every person does, what every son does when they sustain a large enough injury, he's going to run home to mom. And that's what they're expecting. They're expecting him to quite literally lead them to Mother Talzin. Now, this is where we start to get into an explanation of who she is. And this is important because not everyone in the Star Wars universe who is capable of achieving feats using the Force is a traditional Force user. In the Legends, you had all kinds of different people. You had like Gray Jedi, you had all kinds of people out there who could use the Force, but they didn't use it like the Jedi did, where it was only for peace and never attack. You didn't have people who used it like the Sith did, where it was to satisfy their own desire and for absolute power. You had some that would use the Force whenever it is that they happened to need it, but they didn't ally themselves with good or evil. Some just pondered on the Force. There were a lot of different people who use it a lot of different ways. Mother Talzin is really more akin to using magic than using the traditional Force per se. And because of this, her knowledge of magic is a legitimate threat to Darth Sidious, who views her as someone that is essentially his opposite, in the sense that where he wants to take over the galaxy using, using dubious means, using deception, using trickery, operating in the shadows, she's a person that could come along and actually expose him for who he is, expose him as being a member of the Senate, expose him as, operating from inside the Republic, trying to destroy from the inside out. And so for him, for Darth Sidious, Mother Talzin is public enemy number one. She has to go at all possible costs. Now, what we have is Darth Maul communing with Mother Talzin. He's basically speaking with her, and this shows us that not everybody is foolish, that some people are just as smart as Darth Sidious is. And that's why I like this story so much, because we would think, well, Darth Sidious, this guy's been playing the long game and he's this hidden hand, and he literally tricked Yoda and he tricked all these guys. No one knew what was going on. No one knew what he was doing. And it'd be very easy to look at him as this grandiose, grand poobah guy who's running the show, and no one comes close to him. The great thing about this is that there are a lot of people who are on the same level when it comes to operating from the shadows, when it comes to using trickery and deception, when it comes to basically being as capable and intelligent with regards to politics and warfare and combining them into one to achieve a goal. Mother Talzin is no fool, and she says, if you escaped, it may be because your fighters are capable. It may be because that you reduced General Grievous's forces down to a pretty small number so they couldn't maintain the fight. But whatever the reason is, where you go, they will follow, which means if you come to me, you're going to lead them directly to me. So she says, do not come here. Instead, I want you to go to another location. I want you to go to Ord Mantell, and I want you to meet up with all these different families, and I want you to effectively rally them together in an effort to bring down Count Dooku and bring down General Grievous and Darth Sidious. Now again, this is really, Mother Talzin operating from her side, operating from her camp, but it doesn't mean that she's good. It doesn't mean that she's benign. She wants to take over the galaxy. For her, she looks at herself and her child, Darth Maul, as being the ones that can basically run the show in place of Darth Sidious and whoever his apprentice may be, which of course we knew was going to turn out to be Anakin Skywalker. But, once he arrives here, it's again this circumstance where it's all hands on deck. It's Count Dooku following him, it's General Grievous following him, but it's also Darth Maul allying all of his forces together, bringing all these different families together, and it's them basically saying, hey, look, you guys are going to fight on my behalf. Some of you guys are going to be paid. Others of you are doing it because you've been promised power, but for whatever reason, you're all going to be operating on my side. Now, the first one to attack is General Grievous, and the reason for this, let's be honest here, guys. The reason for this is General Grievous was capable in terms of his military strategy, but in the end, he was really just glorified cannon fodder. That's really the way he was treated. You had Count Dooku, who was like this, great big field commander. You had Darth Sidious running from the shadows, and then you had General Grievous, who was just going out and implementing the campaigns. And yeah, it sucked that he died, but it wasn't some major loss for Darth Sidious because he could have just replaced him with anybody else. But at the same time, General Grievous also has a pretty large number of forces at his command in the form of battle droids and so on. So sending them in, again, these guys are just cannon fodder. These are the pre-episode 4 equivalent of stormtroopers. You send them in, they get shot, and it just turns into a battle of attrition. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, a battle of attrition is literally where you just bombard an enemy with continued opponents. It's just a never-ending wave after wave after wave of an onslaught until one of two things happen. Either they end up, losing all their resources and they die, or they just lose the will to fight and they die. But for whatever reason, it's just a continued onslaught of forces. And that's what General Grievous, that's what Count Dooku, and that's what Darth Darth Sidious are relying on here is the fact that they can bombard Darth Maul's forces in a battle of attrition, ultimately wear them down to the point that they have either no will or no more resources left to fight, and then call it a day. The kicker about this is that Darth Maul actually manages to find a way onto the ship of General Grievous, and when he does, he orchestrates, or at least he implements the command to basically sever the connection with the battle droids back on Ord Mantell. And what that means is that those droids are no longer capable of fighting. Now, this is actually a pretty huge move by Darth Maul, because to be honest, this battle of attrition, these overwhelming odds, were going to come back against him. His forces were being reduced by the second, to the point that they were really being dwindled down to almost nothing, and they could not have maintained this fight. And so if Darth Maul had not done this, if Darth Maul had not stowed away or had not found a way onto General Grievous's ship, if he had not cut off the signal to the battle droids, it would have meant that his forces would have lost, and this battle would have been over. The kicker with all this is that, you know, despite being able to deal him in, again, he says, hey, look, you know, or at least he talks to Mother Talzin, and he says, hey, look, you know, is it time for me to come home yet? And she says, no, you know, we still have much work to do. But this is also her coming out and saying, yeah, we're going to take over everything. Like, we're going to control it all. We're going to be the ones that run this entire situation in place of, you know, Count Dooku and Darth Sidious. Now from here, there's also Mother Talzin saying, okay, we're going to grab Darth Sidious and we're going to bring him in. We're going to grab him and we're going to drag him into the light, you know, in order to kill him. And the way they do this is by capturing Count Dooku and capturing General Grievous. Now, this is a funny situation, because again, with Sidious, we would think that he wouldn't care about either one of these guys. I mean, you know, with regards to General Grievous, we know he died. I mean, that wasn't a huge loss for Sidious. We know that Sidious even instructed Anakin Skywalker to kill Count Dooku. But in this instance, Darth Sidious actually shows some measure of concern. Now, there are two huge differences between these two scenarios though. When it came to the point where he told Anakin Skywalker, kill Count Dooku, it was because he looked at Skywalker as his new apprentice and saying, if I can corrupt Skywalker to the dark side, then he'll become a far more powerful apprentice than Count Dooku would ever be. But in this scenario, he doesn't quite have anybody to be his apprentice yet. He's certainly not going to take back Darth Maul, and even if he could, Darth Maul wouldn't want to come back, because Darth Maul now has the opportunity to rule the galaxy alongside his mother if they can defeat Darth Sidious. And so, you know, for Sidious himself, he's like, well, this sucks. You know, this is a really crappy situation. At the same time, Sidious also says, Dooku, you disappoint me. And so while he doesn't necessarily say, fine, go ahead and kill him, I don't care what you do, what Darth Maul does is he says, if Sidious really cared about you, he would have grabbed you, he would have brought you here. You know, he would have effectively saved your life. He would have made sure that I didn't kill you. He could have worked through the Force, done any number of things, but he's effectively left you behind. Now, this is really Darth Maul just kind of playing on Count Dooku, you know, just kind of manipulating his emotions, because this is what Sith do. This is how Sith essentially function. It's manipulating the emotions of other people to bring out their hatred, to bring out their feelings of betrayal, to bring out their rage, and then drag those people to their cause. But for Count Dooku, he's always able to maintain a level head. And this is why I say that in truth, if we look at things for what they are, Count Dooku is in a lot of ways better off than Darth Maul. Because right now, Darth Maul is very capable. Darth Maul is a prodigious fighter. You know, he excels at what he does, but he's also filled with revenge, and he's also filled with rage. You know, there's the old saying, when a drunken man is wanting to fight, it's best to just stay out of his way. You know, let him beat himself up. And that's really what seems to be happening with Count Dooku at the moment. But he also reveals, you know, hey, the reason why we're here is because we're trying to kill Mother Talzin. You know, we're trying to take her out. Now, when Darth Maul says, hey, look, if you work with me, we can both take out Darth Sidious, this seems to be something that Dooku listens to. He seems to say, well, I mean, this might not be a bad idea. And then when Darth Maul reveals Mother Talzin, this also takes Dooku by surprise. But it's also Mother Talzin saying, hey, look, Sidious is going to betray you. Sidious does not care about you. And the reason why she says that is because she says Sidious is in and of himself a betrayer. It's what he does. When he first came to me as Mother Talzin, the goal was to learn from me and for me to learn from him. It's to take our different strategies when it came on how to use the Force, you know, for him to learn magic, for me to learn the true traditional use of the Force, and then together we could take over the galaxy. But instead, he looked at my son Darth Maul and said, this kid's got unbridled power. I mean, this kid's just a force of nature in terms of his ability to fight, to use the Force. I'll just take him and make him my apprentice instead. And so he literally just grabbed Darth Maul and took off running and left Mother Talzin on her own. And so because of this, you know, she says, this is what Sidious will do to you. Sidious will betray you. Now, initially, Count Dooku's kind of like, well, no, that's probably not going to happen. but he also acknowledges the fact that it might. He also acknowledges the fact that may very well take place. Now, the other half of this is that because Count Dooku allows, Darth Maul to effectively just beat himself up while he's drunk, it allows Count Dooku to operate without Maul knowing what it is that he's truly doing. Because again, this is just the blind ambition of Maul. This is the fact that he's so swept up in revenge that he's not looking at the bigger picture. This is small, it's not a great big huge thing, but this is an instance where Count Dooku uses the Force to effectively free General Grievous from his captivity, allowing them to, go through and begin attacking the forces of Darth Maul and eventually gain their own freedom. Now, in addition to all of this, it's not just Sidious and it's not just Count Dooku and General Grievous coming after Darth Maul, it's also Obi-Wan Kenobi, a battalion of clone soldiers, as well as another Jedi Master. Now, the idea here is for them to effectively root out Darth Maul, because again, it seems like at this moment, they're also coming to the realization that Darth Maul is still alive, that Darth Maul had been taken by Darth Sidious, and that Darth Maul is intent on taking over the galaxy if he can kill Darth Sidious himself. And so because of this, the Jedi are effectively rallying to this cause, and they're trying to take out Darth Maul. And so ultimately, it seems like the forces of Maul and Dooku ultimately come together when they go against the forces of a Jedi. This is really just an instance. This is just a classic example of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so, because of the fact that the Jedi are neither friend to Maul or Count Dooku, the two of them are kind of forced to work together by circumstance as opposed to a genuine concern for one another. However, in this conflict, Count Dooku actually kills Master Typele, I think is how you pronounce it, one of the Jedi Masters that was there alongside Obi-Wan Kenobi. And so because of this, Obi-Wan's also got a measure of revenge that he desires here, but it's also a circumstance that he realizes if he were to engage or if he were to allow his revenge to take over, that ultimately would mean his own destruction and falling to the dark side. And so by looking at the circumstances and saying, hey, we're effectively outmatched here. These Mandalorians are more capable than our clone troopers are. These Mandalorians are more organized, they're more structured. We're going against two Sith Lords, and there's only one of me as a Jedi Master. I'm outmatched. I've effectively got to back off, and that's what happens with him. Now, when some of these forces are captured, when some of these Mandalorians are taken prisoner, again, it's the Jedi sitting around and saying, okay, well, what do we do next? What happens in this bigger situation? And so it's the recognition that in some form or fashion, somehow or another, they now have to take out Darth Maul, they have to take out Count Dooku, and they still have to figure out who Darth Sidious is and what it is that he's doing when it comes to taking over the galaxy in and of itself. And so ultimately, we switch to Darth Sidious himself, and he's effectively tracking down Darth Maul and finally arriving at his location. And so the kicker to this is that when he gets there, it's essentially Darth Maul against General Grievous and Darth Sidious. And this actually works out pretty well. It's a pretty badass story with all of them going against one another. Not only that, Count Dooku has effectively been possessed by the spirit of Mother Talzin. And so it's the scenario where it's everybody going against everybody else, or at least the forces of Darth Maul going against the forces of Darth Sidious. Now, this is really the story boiling down to its most logical conclusion. This is somewhat akin to Obi-Wan Kenobi going against Anakin Skywalker and Yoda going against Darth Sidious in Star Wars Episode 3. It just makes sense. It fits in neatly. I would have liked to have seen things change up a little bit, but for the sake of the story being what it is, it works out just fine. The problem with this is that Darth Sidious is very capable and is easily able to overpower Count Dooku. And the reason why is not because of the fact that, Count Dooku is weak, it's because of the fact that Mother Talzin does not know how to use his powers effectively. Because remember, she's not been trained in the true use of the Force on the same level as Count Dooku. And so it's a scenario where she just doesn't know how to utilize the tools effectively. And so because of this, she's eventually overpowered by Darth Sidious. She's forced out of Count Dooku's body, and the two of them actually encounter one another for the very first time. Now from here, it just comes down to a battle of Force versus magic. That's really all it is. Of course, we have Count Dooku trying to get himself out of here, but then he turns around and he allies himself against Mother Talzin. And so what this does is it allows for this sort of reconciliation, and it allows for this wrapping up of all loose ends, in the sense that Mother Talzin essentially sacrifices her life by telling Darth Maul, get out of here, go, run away, live to fight another day. If it means that her child will continue on, it means that his desire for vengeance in her name will continue on. It means that her legacy will continue on. And so with what's left of his Mandalorian forces, Darth Maul is effectively drug away. He's made to leave, and then he's forced to watch as General Grievous steps in and kills his mother. And so what this story does is it actually wraps up, again, pretty open-ended. We basically just have Darth Maul taking off, Mother Talzin being dead, Darth Sidious and Count Dooku, as well as General Grievous, looking to the future, which again sets us into the stage or into the events that go into Episode 3. So as far as I'm aware, and those of you guys who might be a little more knowledgeable about Star Wars content, as far as I'm aware, this is the end of Darth Maul's story. Like, we don't know what happens to him after this. As far as I'm aware, there's no indication that he ever comes back. There's no indication that we ever see him again. The only time that I think we ever see any reference to his character is during Greg Rucka's Shattered Empire, I think, or maybe it's the Princess Leia storyline, and it's where Princess Leia is, she basically touches the Force for the very first time and actually turns away from it. It's when Marvel comes along and says, hey, Princess Leia could have been a Jedi, but she chose not to become part of the Force, not to use the Force, and decided to stay as a conventional human, you know, outside of the Force's capabilities. But if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the subscribe button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, then drop a like, and yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.